Again to the second annual Exotic Research Conference in Mesa, Arizona. Our next speaker is the president and founder of the Institute of Advanced Water Sciences. He's the managing director of Meta Labs, which is a water research facility. And he's the CEO of Rainfresh USA, which is the manufacturer of energetic water products, which will be explained to you. And indeed, will no doubt and forever again change the way you look at water. And with that, I present Mr. Bender.
Thank you. There's a little oxygen depriving here since we've all been focusing our neurons. And so what I want everybody to do is stand up for me. Let's get a little oxygen going. If you've never done abdominal breathing, put your hand down right there and breathe in through your nose and feel the abdomen push out first. Hold it for a second and release it. Now begin to do that abdominal breathing. And as you do, I want you to just imagine we're pulling in oxygen, energy, enthusiasm from a 5-block radius of this hotel. And we're going to fill this room up with some good vibration, as it were, that loves to carry itself on oxygen. So breathe in, and as you breathe in, just see yourself as a magnet pulling in some wonderful energy from a 5-block radius around this hotel. Now what I want you to do is we're going to help the brain a little bit. I want you to take your fingers and make a figure 8. Okay? Just draw. The bigger the figure 8, the better. This is a little bit what we learned earlier about how that body stretching and muscular thing helps lock in brain. This helps brain synergy. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to think of a time when you had marvelous breakthrough. How many are researchers here in this room? Okay, there's a good many of us researchers. We're all actually researchers. We're all discoverers in this great thing called the mystery of life. So what I want you to do is to lock in your mind a time when you were just in that flow and everything was clicking and it all started to make sense. Okay, can you picture that in your mind? Good. Can you picture that time when you were really flowing? That's excellent. Okay, now carry that with you so that as we go through these principles, you begin to have more of those interconnections, and the discussion of water will help you build a better motor. The discussion of water will help you understand different aspects of what you're doing in your life. You can be seated if you like. Water truly is the most exotic substance that has been given to our planet and to us as living, conscious beings. I have spent the last 17 years in a search and understanding of water. And what I can say is after these 17 years is I know far less about water than I thought I knew back then. And matter of fact, it's no longer about understanding or knowing water. It's a love relationship. It's kind of like a woman. If you think you understand her, you're in trouble. But if you love her, she will reveal her mysteries to you. And that is that inner quest in all of our work, is stepping into that feminine space where you're not trying to figure it out, understand it, but you flow with it, you dance with it, and in that dance, a mystery is revealed. And it touches not only your mind, but your heart and your soul. And you're at every level of your being, you taste what it is. So, what is this substance that we so flippantly think of and call water? This common thing, everybody thinks it's H2O. As you'll learn later, that's just one of many substances in pure water. This thing that without it, there is no life. You see, anywhere you see life's processes, you see the presence of water. Matter of fact, I was amazed to find out in Genesis, when God sought to create the worlds, He spoke, He vibrated, used vibration to create creation. He spoke across water. Water pre-existed creation because it is the essential element in which creation is built upon. Once we understand or begin to play with water, we'll realize it is the true food of our body, the true way that all the transport mechanisms take place. I believe that it is the greatest medicinal product that you can ever consume, because unlike any other substance that you bring into your body, with maybe the exception of alcohol — I'm having fun with alcohol too. I think it's a misused wonder cure. Which is a type of water, by the way. But every other process, food, herb that we take, our body has to go through the digestive system to utilize and get a lot of the energy or the frequency domain information into the body. Now, we've got this incredible device, what I call our mega lab, and that's our mouth. Anytime we put anything in our mouth, we're analyzing the substance in a parts per million ratio. Our nose will analyze in a parts per billion ratio. It's a fabulous instrument, and that's why the longer you keep any substance, if you're taking a supplement, always let your mouth taste that substance, no matter how yucky it tastes. Some of those things are pretty nasty. You just have to keep it in there long enough so that the lab can send instructions down to the digestive system and say, okay, this is how I need to process this substance. Water, when you drink pure water, it says, oh, this is water. Open up stomach lining, straight into extracellular fluid, and from there I can distribute and go where I need to throughout the body. And so I believe it is the medicine of the future when we understand how to truly capture frequency domains and information domains, lock it into water so that it's a pure vibrational transfer. It can go to the cells where many other things get blocked. A lot of these, I've worked with magnetic field therapy and electrotherapy, and a lot of the things that are being discussed, they're wonderful adjuncts to this process of balance and healing. But the body is really interesting. The reason why we are not dead today from the electromagnetic bombardment is we have this wonderful insulative process that when we have a frequency following response, or a frequency that continually is bombarded in our body, we have a way to filter that out, to shut that down. Matter of fact, this room right now is full of all sorts of ambient noises that your hearing has filtered out because it's a repetitive signal. You can, if you shift your awareness, all of a sudden you can hear the buzz of the transformers and the air return and all the different things. So we learn in a process of any administration of external input, we learn how to filter out. When we worked with electromagnetic pulses, we'd found square waves, sine waves, all these things. Eventually the body would create a filtering mechanism. That's why the little TINS units that you put on, you have to continually change those frequencies, because We're kind of like the Borg. We adapt, you know, and block out those frequencies. Well, water, you take it in, opens up the stomach lining. If you have the frequency properly encoded in water, it goes straight there. There's no way to filter it out. It's going right at the cellular level. I also believe that if we begin to work and understand and appreciate water, that we will realize that this is the energy of the future. Water, if it is kindly talked to instead of violently attacked with energy, it will disassociate at your request. And we'll just touch a little on disassociation and some of the principles that have okay. Let's focus that a little bit better. It's hard to read those things. Okay, so what is in water? We're talking about water that is completely ionically free. There's over 66,000 known pollutants that can be dissolved in water. There is, but take all that away. Take out all the ion content and stuff. And let's just look at water itself. We've got the basic H2O molecule, which is a marvelous, marvelous molecule. It sits there in scissors. I call it Mickey Mouse of the universe. And then you've got your H2O2 metastable bonds, peroxide bonds, your hydronium, H3O, OH, OH minuses. You've got 8 molecular forms of oxygen. You've got 3 isotopes of hydrogen. You've got a puzzle of O's and H's that combined in different ways can create radical different results. I can take a fluid substance that you would call water and feed it to rats, and within 48 hours they will die of thirst. I can take another substance, combine them around, and it won't make it past your tongue. Your tongue and throat swell up because it superhydrates. All just in arranging these O's and H's. Now, nature's way of this is important to learn this little piece of information, because just about everything we do centers around these 3 elements: hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Hydrogen, as Walter Russell tells us, is the first manifestation of an element coming from its pure light-based into material matter. It is the white noise of all elements to come. Within hydrogen, you have the resonances of every other element manifestation through the scale. So from hydrogen, that's one of the components of its memory in water, is because it has all resonances aligning the oxygen molecule and the different groupings. You can mimic or picture or capture any of the energy domains that we work with. And so the manipulation of oxygen, hydrogen, and the fixing of carbon is really how we accomplish all that we accomplish in living systems. In oxygen, oxygen is the mother of all life forms. She is the giver of life. Now, also, if you've ever encountered and arranged a woman who is out of her element, she is also a destroyer. So there is this creative, life-giving aspect of oxygen, and then there is a very negative and destroying aspect. We have all this confusion about, boy, our body needs more oxygen. You hear about antioxidants, and they say, well, no, we don't need oxygen because we take all these antioxidants. There is a form of oxygen that does things that we don't want to happen. And carbon, and I'm using the term carbon loosely, not to speak of just of C6 or C66 or any of these forms, but as the template. We learn in the Kabbalah, which is a spiritual tradition that I study, that the worlds were made in the tree of life by this masculine principle, this feminine principle, and then there's what we call the center pillar of life, which is the fixing, or the Adon Kadmon is the Hebrew word. It's the matrix or the crystalline template at which these balances of forces work. The masculine hydrogen, the feminine oxygen needs a template or a child to fix itself around. Now, I want to walk you through some of nature's glorious over-unity principles. Nature always operates in resonance. It always produces, it always transmutes, it always produces more out yield than it takes in. And our lack of getting it is simply we have not touched that inner core of our being to find these principles. I'll give you a hint. The greatest over-unity energy that exists is not on that slide. It's love. Because regardless of what you took in, if you have love, you will be able to give more out. And until you understand love, you won't be able to create the over-unity engines, machines, and devices. Until we understand that this is all we do in our life is simply are trying to manifest some inward reality that is tugging at our spirit, saying, we just want expression. We want you to create these wonderful machines that show forth a part of the true spiritual nature and fabric at which this world is created on. So, we're going to talk about, I'll get off my sermon here for a minute and get back to a little science. The glorious substance of how nature captures light energy and delivers it to your cell. And this is a chlorophyll molecule. You don't have to understand science and how molecules, but just look at the hydrogen, carbon. This uses magnesium and potassium as fixers for the light receptors. But look at this thing as a circuit, not as a molecule, and see how it's basically capturing light and turning that into a chain, which, we've got light that begins to be bound up into complex carbohydrate chains, which then convert to sugars. And sugar is, wow, that is a neat stuff. I've got several molecules of sugar, which becomes the basic energy for the cell. I'll come back to this one. Let's see, I'm just going to flip through some breakdowns. This is how in Cell Respiratory, how the light is liberated. You've got it turns back into water, and then the spent oxygen in the process is bound to the the remaining carbon as carbon dioxide so that we can release that carbon dioxide back to the plant. It's a beautiful synergetic system where the plant takes that energy, takes the carbon back, fixes it with more light energy. That light then is transferred back into our bodies in the form of hydrogen. And through all the complex processes take place in the body can be reduced down to us taking in light through the vehicle of water, and water being that transmitter of all the energies and directors of all the energies. Look at well, this is just another. Let's look at some sugar molecules. Turn it over. What do we have in this molecule? OH, H's, O's, and carbon. It's water and carbon, or oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon. The difference, a slight shift of this H and this OH is how these sugars are directed. This is how the information domains in the body send it to the different delivery systems. So a little slight shift of an OH to an H minus or a H2O to a hydrogen peroxide at a 0.00 ratio, that will make a shift in where that energy goes. It's got intelligence. And that intelligence is based around these O's and H's. One who understands and walks with these O's and H's can then program them using technologies that are emerging, that we've spoken of today, using our own intentionality, all these things in combination to create a true living water. What happens in the cell, and here's just a biological view of the cell, is you have these lipid layers, the little squiggly heads, and those are, by the way, the transmitters of information. It starts a sonic information and tells the water where to go and what to do. But as the thing I want to touch on is just to have you look at this biological view of a cell, to know that the water, the extracellular water around the cell, is sitting there, unable usually to cross into the cell. Aging is simply cellular dehydration. When you boil everything down, when your cells can no longer structure the water inside them, they begin to release that water, the cell begins to break down. That's why when we were an infant full of the life force, we were about 89% water. When we age and are about to die, we're about 65% water. And that's why we wrinkle and begin to show the fact that we can't hold water. Even though we may have the adequate amount of water in our extracellular cell, we don't have enough in our intercellular body. And so here's another view of the cell, my view of the cell, from an electrical point of view. Is there anybody have a white piece of paper that I could stick under there to give it a little more? Never mind. Does that help? You have the cell wall, which is the boundary layer of the cell. And I realize that not all cells look like an egg, but within all life processes surrounding that field, anybody that's done auric work or have seen the threads that are in and around the body will see this pattern. You've seen the Earth in the macrocosm and the microcosm. It's always the same field that is developed. As that field gains strength, and that's these lines, oops, wrong direction. Hey, that helped a little. But I'll just, since you can't see them, there's that field that's established around the cell. And that field begins to take the water, which, by the way, you take distilled water, which is about 72 dynes per centimeter of wetness. You take it into your body heats it up, adds some thermal energy to it, some other properties to it. It drops down to about 58 dynes per centimeter. It needs 46 to cross the cell wall. And so the cell has to produce an electrical field. With the help of the sodium-potassium pump, you have an osmotic pressure that begins to build up and create an electrical potential that allows the water to work into the cell. So if the body's in optimum energetic form, we have strong fields around our cell and we're getting adequate cellular hydration. As our body goes into stress and is unable to produce the energetic yield necessary, those fields begin to break down. They can actually be measured in millivolt ranges. Inside the cell, let's get back to the slide, you have the mitochondria, and I have them pictured as little miniature energy generators, the life generators of the cell. And there's some brilliant work done by several people on mitochondria that it's well worth reading and understanding, especially if you're, by the way, working on electrical devices. A lot of the secrets are right there in the body. And as we look at the body, we understand the external world. As we look at the external world, we understand more about what's going on inside. So, at any point that you have a question relevant to where I'm at, feel free to raise a hand and
What did you just say about the mitochondria? What do they do?
you'd probably need someone like Dr. Ron to explain all the full functions of the mitochondria, but it is the actual life provider in the cell at which it's providing it's the heart of the cell, giving it its functions. So it's also it's the main energy converter for the cell to take in that light and to structure the water in the cell, to hold it in structure. We have to live in structure. Water in the body is highly structured. Water outside of the body is random in bulk. And so drinking a water that's structured reduces the energetic load on the body necessary to structure it. That's why we have 3 places in the world where people live to long 120. They're having children at Hunza, which you've all heard about, I'm sure. Vicavamba Valley in Peru, Georgia, Russia, and there's actually 2 other places, one in Venezuela, that they don't quite have the life expectancy as those 3 places. They're having children at 80 years old. They're retiring from getting old and wanting to sit around on the porch at 130 and living their lives full and active. So researchers went in there and they said, golly, it's got to be the kombucha mushrooms that they eat or the yogurt that the guys, and you've seen all these things over the years surface. But the reality is the Georgian Russians drink vodka like it's going out of style. The Peruvians smoke. Some of them are vegetarian. They usually pick Hunzas because they're vegetarians and stuff, and and have a moderately normal lifestyle. But other ones are, you know, meat and fat eaters and stuff. But the one thing they all have in common is the water they drink. And that water is pure, but it's highly structured, and it's, if I put a total dissolved solids meter in there and measure the ion content dissolved in the water, it will register at a few parts per million. But if I look at the water, it's full of minerals that are in a suspended, excited state. They're little miniature batteries that are keeping that water into a highly structured formation that allows, as these people drink it, they're drinking a water that their body has to do almost no work to convert. So what is the characteristics of a good, living, energetic water? And as we look up here on this chart, we'll see that when water is invigorated with life, we will find that it has a high level of O2. Now, in 1985, when I developed my first water process, and a few years later, doctors began to tell me that there was elevated levels of oxygen in the people's blood, and they started actually calling it oxygenated water. I didn't even know it was oxygenated. I mean, I used oxygen in the process. And then the people in the bottled water industry said, oh, you know, this is a fluke thing. And a few years later, they started asking me to come to their conferences and speak on oxygenated water. And now everybody and their brother, there's, I think, about 12 oxygenated water companies out there. Unfortunately, what they're doing is they're taking O2 and they're pumping it into bottles any way they can figure out they can. And as long as the bottle's closed, it's got oxygen in it. Once you open it and start shaking it, most of the oxygen comes out. What I was doing was I was energizing the water, and when the water's energized, it just drinks in that life-giving oxygen in its proper form. And so to oxygenate water, you simply have to understand how to invigorate it. Once you invigorate it, it'll take in oxygen on its own. It does in nature. The next thing that we're talking about H2O, water, and all these little combinations, but the two things that water needs is more oxygen and more hydrogen. It sounds quirky, doesn't it? Because water is oxygen and hydrogen, but available oxygen for extracellular fluid and work in the body, and available hydrogen for intercellular consumption are the two elements that water, if it has high levels of this, have anti-aging health benefits that just, it's amazing. I mean, some of the neat letters and things that we get from people that have been on our product. Now, we don't sell it as any medical claims. We don't even make, it's just a good tasting bottled water. We put oxygen in it to make it taste good. And that's what, you know, I tell all my FDA friends. And the fact that all the doctors in the Metroplex are prescribing it to their patients is, it's not my fault. But when we start getting people that use it continually, start getting back those comments, thank you for, you know, this, we don't even, then we just say, well, it must have been your change in lifestyle. I've found that if you can always defer praise, you can avoid a pitfall. The next thing that a structured water will have is it'll have a low surface tension. Now, the lower that surface tension is, the easier it is to get into the cell. By the way, that's why I love that alcohol, man. It's got a surface tension of 28 dynes. So once we can encode alcohol, it's the perfect delivery system to instantly get into the blood and into the body frequency information. Unfortunately, most of the alcohol that's consumed today has been encoded with the greed-ridden ambitions of beverage companies, and you're getting some bad information. You're getting some bad newsletters when you drink that stuff. So if you are going to continue drinking it, I actually take stuff that I'm making for like tinctures down to a guy that does magnetizing of things, and he blasts it with one of those magnetron, things that put a enormous current and zaps clean a lot of the energy put in. Strong magnetic fields can break free a lot of the information domains in water. Low surface tension, though, ideally 45 dynes would be awesome for transport. Highly structured. Simple water molecules can form into all sorts of complex clustered rings depending upon the information, electromagnetic information, or the frequency domains, or the ion content resonance influencing the water, can all structure water. The little harmonizing disc, I have here a little pattern, and it got wet because I was drinking water on it. But this little pattern, especially with sugar-based waters, that have some carbons in it, you can shift the taste on that so quick. It's hilarious. Get a room full of people, and there's several hundreds of these little patterns. You just need a couple of them. And I'll leave this here, and if anybody wants to cut off a pattern, take it home. It's just 2 spirals, and but you can put it on any kind of hydrocarbon or carbon substance, and it'll shift, adding energy to it. Adding some structure. The key to this work, though, is keeping that structure. You can broadcast anything throughout the electromagnetic spectrum into water, and it will momentarily shift to that information domain. But water's job is to exchange information. By renouncing any information of its own, it becomes the carrier of information for all living systems. By renouncing form of its own, it becomes the very form transformer that exists within all systems. That's why the mineral kingdom transfers its energy to the plant kingdom via water, the plant kingdom to the animal kingdom. Have you ever seen a brain dehydrated? It's just this little, like, thin, flat substance sitting on a pan. The brain is, I think, if there's a doctor in the house, quote me right, I think it's 96% water. Water is the memory vehicle at which we store all information in the body, on the planet, within every system. And so the quicker we understand that mechanism and how to encode water with specific frequency domains, the quicker we'll be able to produce phenomenal results. It contains universal beneficial information domains at all octaves of communication, from the geomagnetic bodies, chemical electrical absorption body, the high frequency body, the photon body, and what I call the scalar body. These different levels that our body exists. We've got all these sheaths. We've got a very physical, structured sheath, water influences. We've got an electrical sheath, water influences. We've got a higher emotional sheath that the water influences. And then we've got our light body. And by the way, when you get water right, it is good tasting. Man, there's nothing better. See, when I was 11 years old, I was lost. I was with the Boy Scouts, and my backpack strap broke, and I said, I'll catch up. And being the cocky young Boy Scout that I was, I said, you know, if I cut across this area, I can catch up with them without having to walk down this windy trail. Well, I soon found myself lost in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And the day was wearing on, and I'm starting to get, you know, scared. Matter of fact, I'm really getting a lot of scared. Hadn't done a vision quest yet. So I was tired, hungry, and scared, and I came to a spot where you could see this high glacier mountain way above me. There was water spewing out of a rock. It was cold. It was just clean water. I sat there and I drank the purest, richest substance that I'd ever drank in my life up to that point. And not only did it revive me physically, but my fear washed away. Because I touched something of life, something that was not unbalanced by man. And that made an impression on me. I remember sticking the water in my aluminum canteen, and an hour later it just tasted like water. And so my whole life has been in search of that substance, because when you get it all right, the water will have a sweet, soft taste. And you can have a dozen other waters that people will drink, and they'll say, I don't know, there's something special about this one. So, let's get into a little alchemy here. Anybody a water researcher? Plays with water? Okay, there's a few. I hope at the end of this thing there's going to be a whole room full of people that are starting to play with water. Again, for any of the understanding that you need, it's there. So, what you need to do if you're working with water and you're trying to energize water, if you would like to experience a fullness of life that comes through drinking proper water, the first thing, it needs to be ion-free. It needs to be pure, purified through distillation, reverse osmosis, different processes to get all the junk out. Once you've got that junk out, you need to make sure it's biologically clean. Now, there's a misnomer. There's really no such thing as water that doesn't have bacteria in it. Not in nature. Matter of fact, when I do my biological sampling and culturing, I have to buy a water that's like a triple distilled water that they stick and aerate it with radiation. Because radiation is about the only thing that will destroy anaerobic, aerobic, all those things. Now, I ozonate. I use UV 3 times in my process. I use ozonation 4 times in my process. And submicron filtration, and I get out all the bad bacteria, but there's no way I can get rid of all that bacteria. Matter of fact, there are certain bacteria that are very beneficial and that live in a ozone and oxygen environment that you can culture and really charge up the water. But what I'm talking about here is a biologically clean water, free of any of the harmful and aerobic type bacteria, which can be done through UV, microfiltration, ozonization, and such. Then you've got to erase the previous memories. Think of it, all our water is being recycled constantly, and like a dirty cassette tape that has been programmed over and over and over again, you've got the scratchy background of information always on that tape. Now, there is a way to completely clean the slates, and that is to disassociate the water into its gases and then recombine it and implode it back into water. And you'll find an incredible memory-free water. And if you're ever doing any homeopathic work or impregnating water, building one of these Brown's gas generators for water is awesome. Then understanding that even a 0.1 of a degree of temperature makes a radical difference when you're working with water. Temperature is everything, or density really is everything. These are 4 point. That's just one anomalous point of many. Another one that we should all be aware of is the temperature our body operates. That's another anomalous water point. 50 degrees is another anomalous water point. There is even a supercrit when you go up into boiling where water takes on a characteristic in super steam technologies where it begins to behave as a solid. And so throughout the spectrum of water, temperature or energy domain, heat and density give water an ability to take on different characteristics. So whenever you're doing an experiment with water, be very conscious of the temperature and play with the temperature, and you'll get some surprising results. Okay, if you're going to try to put any kind of information in water for any length of time, implosion is almost a necessity. When you get water spinning in an implosion dynamics, it begins to draw in energy from the environment around us. And so what Schauberger led us to is the reality of all fluids, all energy currents behave on an implosion pattern. The vortex is always there. And that's out of Callum Coates' book, by the way, an excellent book to read, Living Energies by Callum Coates. And there is a primary and secondary field that is always created in any energetic system and in any fluid behavior. And so when we make our devices around vortical concepts, whether we're talking about electrical fields, guess what? If you get an electron flowing in a vortical down a wire, there is no B fields, there's no magnetic fields, and there's no energy loss, there's no resistance, because it's flowing in its defined path instead of beating against the walls. The throwing off the magnetic fluxes is simply a response to an incorrect delivery system. What's the time? Oh dear. Okay. Okay. Next, most important thing in impregnating water is the gas-liquid interface. The nanobubbles that are created in water is how energy is transferred. And so if you're going to try to bombard water with some living energies or things, you've got to understand the relationship of the gases in there. If you can, if you want to do really exotic, fun stuff, you can pull a vacuum on water, pull out all the nitrogen, because nitrogen is usually not a friendly element with the kinds of energies we're working with, and then add back in some trace of noble gases. I've been told by Dale Pond, though, that if you add xenon to water, that it can become explosive, even though I've done it and it hasn't happened. So I just always pull out that cautionary note. Then the next important thing, whenever you're trying to impregnate water with energy, information, whether it's radionic energy, is to understand that you really, if you want to hold that energy in the water, you need a multi-frequency layering. You need octaves in sound and in light. I do everything I do, I always have what I call sound, and that is everything, I call sound everything in the absorption spectrum. If we look at, I'm going to have to flip through these. If we look at the chart of elements here, we have all these energies that are in the absorption spectrum, ELFs to radio waves, And then we come up to light right here, and there's this anomalous point in the IR spectrum where we shift the characteristics from electron behavior, absorption to emission behavior, and begin to start having the photonic properties that you have in water, in energy. And it's at that point that it's a really neat energy, a free energy point, by the way, if you can create devices that resonate in that field. But so what I call this is sound, and I call this light. So whenever I'm doing work, I always have a subharmonic of sound, whether that's a magnetic oscillation, radio frequency, microwave, and then a light-based overtone or harmonic, so that I can create a higher dimensional saturation into the water. It's getting it from two angles, and then the harmonics are going back both ways. I try to work with 11 octave ratios, seem to have the best. This is the Walter Russell chart of elements. As the elements follow a wave of creation, starting with subparticles of hydrogen, but as you go through, you'll see that there are, just like was shared in this morning, there is a negative side or 180-degree side of every element, and this chart alone is an invaluable tool for any researcher, because as he's trying to resonate bodies of information, choosing the cathode and anode to accomplish that is you look where you want to go with it, and you pick the metal groupings that resonate in that field. Notice the noble gases are down the center line, because the noble gas, we call them noble gases because they don't mix, as they say, but they're really the center point neutral thing of bringing in the 0 point energy, that undefined energy, which is, in my oversimplification, we deal with energies in the time domain. We see a wave across time and across space. So you need space and time to display frequency. If you were to take that wave and fold it back in on itself, and if you can move me up so we can see the bottom of this slide. Okay, yeah, there you go. If you take that wave, you now have a circle which is not in time. It's outside of time, a scalar bubble, a phase canceled, or Dr. Glenn Ryan's non-Hertzian energies. These are eternal energies because they are not in time or space. They exist all around us. We simply need to understand how to tap them, bring them in, and use them, and add to their information, or be a part of that cycle. I wanted to introduce to researchers, anybody who's worked with Cyril's work or with Marco Rodin. This is based on Marco Rodin. The use of magic squares in determining harmonic levels, in determining where I'm trying to translate Marco Rodin's work into defining the vortex, the perfect flow. What he did basically is he wrapped magic squares on a toroid and came up with this beautiful mathematically complete expression, and the numbers never lie if you get the numbers to work correct, where they're all in symmetry and balance. I don't have time to explain a lot of it, but the point is that I believe this is the math. By the way, it's simple math. It's not that higher math that goes way over my head. Anyway, one day I finished a lecture, and these two guys sat there, and started writing on the board and doing these differential equations and said, now you said this and this. And I said, I said that? You know, I didn't know what they were even talking about. They knew what I was talking about, but I didn't. So, since I'm running out of time, I wanted to hit disassociation. Okay, nature uses low energy to accomplish disassociation. In that cell, in that plant, it's constantly disassociating and recombining water and using it to accomplish all sorts of things. There is no big megawattage voltage hooked up to that plant. We've got to understand that nature always uses a series of subsystems, gentle brushes coming from several different directions to create disassociation. So there's no necessarily magic one frequency. There are a series of frequencies and a series of applications. So using heat and pressure along with electrical thing will enhance plate discharge. I believe that the disassociation, low energy yields will come through us understanding light-based technologies. Whenever you disassociate water in plates, you've got a charged surface. Immediately upon the forming of bubbles, they start pairing. And all the magic in working with some dynamic changes, whether you're talking about transmutation, whether you're talking about manipulation of elements, or creating energetic waters, or creating superfuels, is in the nascent state or the monatomic state of hydrogen and oxygen. And producing monatomic hydrogen and oxygen is an art in itself. Using plate technology, you're immediately exposing, as soon as the bubbles are formed, they're on a charged surface, you get immediate pairing. George Wiseman will be sharing on that. Using hydrostatic anodes and electrodes, we found if we can pull the bubbles off, put water across it, you can get a higher monatomic yield. Create the shortest path. Remember, oxygen is paramagnetic, hydrogen diamagnetic. You can use magnetic fields in relationship with oxygen and hydrogen to move it into different spaces. This is just I'm sharing for the researchers. I want to finish my lecture by just stating from the heart that for the researchers, there's really no magic investor out there waiting to freely fund your project without any strings attached. Nikola Tesla died a poor man. Victor Schauberger died a poor man. If making money is still some illusion stuck in our matrix, we're never going to get it. We're never really going to be liberated that the true provider for this is the one who's empowered us with the creativity to bring forth this kind of manifestation. If we become faithful stewards of our work and just keep doing what we do, how we can do it, Spirit will provide the resources. I stand today as a man who owes no investor any money. I provide for a family of 6. I got 6 children. I support 8 other families in my business. I've never borrowed money from a bank. I've just done what's right. And yes, I have been glued, screwed, and tattooed by so many people in the process of learning that it's all about stewardship. It's all about being faithful to a vision that's in you, that you've got to create that change for the planet. And if I die a poor man, so what? if I've brought change, if I've brought life, if I've touched one person drinking a glass of water and they find some inner part of themselves and they come to some inner revelation of what this mystery called life is about, I've done a good work. And so I exhort all of us, don't go after that illusion. You're safer buying a lottery ticket. Work on your work. They'll come to you, and you just basically kind of push them away. You know, you can give them opportunities. You know, you can lay down some money here and walk away from the table. And actually, occasionally, some people do that for me. I've learned now just to charge an exorbitant amount for consulting, and they either pay it and you help someone. And so there's a bunch of water companies out there that are claiming they invented the thing, but if you look at their records, someone like me helped them get there. But so what? Do our work. Do it with integrity, sincerity, and consistency, and you will be rewarded. And the reward is far greater than $1 zillion that we wouldn't know what to do with anyway. Thank you.
Do you have copies of those overheads? Those were very fascinating.
If anybody would like information, I even said in my little thing that I would have a paper. I'm going to leave my cards up here. They're over there. You can take a card. I've got, I'll contact me by email and say I'm looking for the chart. All this is on my computer, so I can send you the files.
Don't hurry, Joe. We're trying to track down Walter Rawls as we speak. Walter Rawls, you're not sitting out in the audience, are you? Oh, there he is. There he is. All you got to do is put out an APB, and there he is.
I want all the information I get. It's all out of your paper.
Let me get you the cards here. Yeah.
Sorry? I guess he took whatever was left with him, so guys can congregate over there.
I'm familiar with Dr. Lorenz. We've had many wonderful discussions about in my water.
We'll have Walter
I
Rawls
cluster
with
them
us
a lot
momentarily
less
for
than he does. He's
program
great.
on the future of magnetics
Well,
and their
he's bringing it to the.
power and impact.
I think he's one of the top dogs in the clustered realm. Oh, yes. Where is that?
And what do you do with it?
Just put it under your food, especially wine or any kind of fruit drinks. Maybe if you can get someone with the scissors.
The rest of you are all going to rush out and get a glass of water, I know.
Cut it in two drops that they
Uh-huh.